Everybody out there had some awesome games, and I wanted to see them. So today we're going to be watching some viewer games and breaking them down. Let's jump in. Welcome back, everyone, to Random's Thoughts. As mentioned, we're going to be talking about some viewer games today. Now, I'm doing this actually offline as opposed to live on the Twitch stream. Why is that? Well, we've had such a fantastic response to me calling out for viewer games that there's a huge queue. So I want to make sure that we give every game its due and we give it some time. So this way, people aren't waiting until, sometime in 2025 for me to get to all the games. Now, before we jump in, if you want to get your own game reviewed, either here on YouTube or over on my live Twitch stream, RTChompGG, by the way, over on twitch.tv, or maybe both, then hit up the Random Thoughts Discord. It's in the description of this video, or if you do join us on the live stream, ! Discord over there. Oh, and by the way, as much of a shill as it sounds, the likes and subscribes and comments absolutely do help. I do make it a point to try and answer all of the comments. So shout out to everybody who's been watching these videos. But let's jump in. Quick aside, everybody, before we get into the actual content, I was accepted into the Phobies Content Affiliate Program, the content creator program, you might call it. Shout out to the Phobies team and thank you for that. But the reason I'm telling you, everybody out there, dear viewer, dear listener, is to let everybody know that I do receive some compensation from the Phobies team as a result of being part of that program. Now, I loved Phobies before, and I still love Phobies now, and I expect I will still continue to love Phobies in the future. So look forward to more Phobies content coming from Random's Thoughts. So now, on with the show. So before we actually officially zone in, there were some notes left for this match. So from the LilPepe who submitted the game highlight, I was at a disadvantage in the end game key-wise, but had hard HP and pressure point advantage. So I kept stalling the game until the cheap damage of the panic points got his heart low enough that I could catch him off guard. The lesson here, I think, is not to commit unless you are sure the push will get the job done. Hope you enjoy it. Well, we're going to jump in and see. For our first breakdown, we're going to be jumping into a LilPepe game here on Crypto. Crypto recently came back into the rotation. It was there, I believe, when I first started playing Phobies. I feel like I've said that a lot about a lot of maps, and now I'm going to get one of those weird moments where I'm not sure if I'm remembering correctly. But what I do remember is, in fact, that our hero is zoning in here in the blue trunks, starting with a Gravedigger opener. Now, the bad guy here, over on the orange side of the board, let's see what they do. So this is a fairly long game, although this map can lend itself to that. It kind of depends. And here we see a stabby opener, which, while there has been a lot of talk of stabby openers on a variety of maps, especially small ones, here it's kind of abnormal. This is a weird positioning, but stabby on the centralized stim here can represent an enormous threat. Now, the cat is kind of expected. We see the cat come out and immediately claim a point. We see a follow-up cat, which allows a bank from our blue player. But what we don't see, because they broke this block early on, is the block down here on the blue, we'll call it, panic point. Now, the follow-up from our orange player is somewhat expected. We get a murder wing to recap this point, or not recap this point, to claim the stim. Let's talk about things appropriately, right? Now, clearly it's going to vacate for the stabby. The stabby on the stim, as mentioned, is going to push a bunch of damage. This is a fairly sizable stabby. We're talking a level 7 one, so it has over 1700 health. It's not going to be easy to dislodge, and it's going to be able to provide that turret, that stationary defense, and it's just going to be able to point at either the northernmost or the center panic point and just annihilate what steps on them. So we're going to have to see a lot of sacrificial keys committed by the blue player. But in the meantime, we do see an unbearable follow-up, which I don't know how I feel about Unbearable on this map just yet. It does have an advantage because of the lobs, obviously, but that's true on just about any map where there's obstacles. And it's not a bad stabby answer, but it's not spectacular. Now, apparently this Gravedigger is on the demolition crew because it is annihilating all of these backmost obstacles. As you can see, there were two. Now we have none. Little Sesame Street action there for you. Now, our orange player banked, so I'm very curious what we're about to see from our blue player. Do they choose to bank, or are they going to try and defend as well? Now, the Unbearable assumes its position on the stim, similar to what I was describing, I expect Stabby to, but it actually vacates. So where are we sending this Unbearable? It's a little interesting. Now, the Newly Dead here, I think, is a pretty decent follow-up. I would have liked to have seen and I hope we'll see this, that the cat goes in first, then the newly dead, thereby prompting more keys or more commitment out of our orange player. And that looks like exactly what we see. So take a minute to explain this. Why do we care the order? Well, A, this is going to take a month to get up there. It's still got, it's got a full turn of moves and then some before it even gets there. However, even if it was closer, you'd want to see the cat committed first. Why? Clearly, whatever steps on there is going to die, right? The murder wing is going to ensure that. But if the cat comes in and steps on the newly dead, it's just dead. However, in this case, if the newly dead goes second, it's going to require a commitment by either another set of single key phobies, thereby forcing the orange player to do certain things on certain turns that they may not want to do, or it's going to force a commitment of one of these much more relevant phobies, and now this unbearable's in position to cover it. So even if it were to be the stabby that eliminates this, unbearable beating up on stabby is kind of the scenario you want to have if you had to choose between what was available here. So just a little elaboration there. In the meantime, we see the Gravedigger playing a little more aggressively onto the Hevo. This is presumably just to soften it up. Now the unbearable repositions, which is fine, but the big man, your favorite and mine, with the superhero jump out of the vault is erratic. Now, given the blue advantage on panic points and what is arguably a blue position, or advantageous blue position in general, this kind of makes sense. You're able to sneak the erratic up while you have somewhat of an advantage. You're not trying to desperately, oh, I need to Hail Mary with this erratic. Instead, it gives you a little bit of time to get it in the mix. But from our orange player, we have a sheep follow-up. You've heard from me many times. I don't like sheep as an answer to erratic. Is it any different on this map? I think it might be a little better, just because you have to dance more. It's not as easy to just say, oh, well, I'll move erratic into a better position and then just continue forward. Instead here, it has to dance around the lava tile. It's going to have to get out of range. It's a smaller map. I can kind of see it here. But now we're seeing the key exchange. We saw the 5th phobie from our orange player go down. We're now at 5 with yet another resurrect phobie in Mopsy. And our blue player is in a pretty solid position. Now, the orange player makes a cool move here by going in and then just coming back out and not leaving the sheep to just get blown up, because it absolutely would have been incinerated here. Everything that's here would have killed it. But, notably, that means that the panic points remain blue. So, while we get some repositioning from the orange player, they're not really advancing their board position in a meaningful way, and this is one I'm confused about. Like, why Clinico here? Yes, you get to heal this. It took some damage. But is that really needed? I feel like you'd rather just have a 1 key, maybe 2 1 keys, or a 1 key and a 2 key, so that way you can reclaim the point, they send in Mopsy, you're able to kill the Mopsy and then reclaim it, and then, as we were discussing earlier, push your opponent back into, oh, I have to commit something good. Now you're down to 6 keys of it, not even banked, just available eventually, versus 7. All right, that's pretty even. I would argue that our blue player has a board position advantage, aside from the panic points, but I just like the phobies they have. However, if it was flipped the other way around and these were 2 orange points, you can make an argument for the orange player. The bottom line is that the commitment has to be initiated by our orange player here. So we hand the turn back, and in fact, we get an aggressive invade with a block. This is a cool play that I've seen before, where Gravedigger, or say Crushmore, is able to go in on the opposing point, and if it was orange, they could do it on the bottom, and then block off access, or line of sight, or line of targeting, really, from whatever's stemmed up. Now, does that limit our blue player? Not really here. I mean, we're going to lose the Gravedigger, clearly. There's way too much damage that's represented here. But it prevents an easy retake from our orange player, which means that we're pushing a bunch of damage on a smaller map. Ooh. This could be the cover for the, the cover artwork. But we have a mere 4775 on health. I say mere, but it's still above half. But our orange player is definitely under pressure to do something. What that something is, we'll have to see. But at this stage, the repositioning from our blue player means that it's going to be real challenging here to commit in a meaningful manner. Get a little dance here between Ginsting and the jar and the erratic in order to ensure that we get everything appropriately aligned. So the Murder Wing is coming down here. Can this Murder Wing even hit it? Okay, so if this Murder Wing is able to connect, it will eliminate the jar, which is commonly something that happens on this map, especially at lower ranks, where it's that dance of, can I get my jar to lock off most of the map, or is it going to be the Murder Wing coming in and eliminating it, and the fight for those two? So we see a reposition here in order to try and protect it, but ultimately, that jar will die if our orange player wants to go in. Our blue player is, in fact, out of keys, though, and I kind of would have liked to see the jar play a little more defensively. You have all the panic points. There's no reason to just hemorrhage keys for free here. I mean, yes, it will trade, and I guess you can reclaim this. At the end of the day, I don't think it makes too much of a difference because this Clinico play seems like it just was not worth it. Given that the panic point advantage was already in blue player's favor, and as I've mentioned many occasions already, the orange player had to commit into blue player. That means that they were going to inherently be at a phobie disadvantage just because of the way things lined up. But the follow-up here is Mount Crushmore. So now we're looking at a orange panic point advantage with a fairly solid supplement. More than fairly solid. A very solid supplement here. Do we get some more repositioning? Do we get a takedown? No, we don't actually get a takedown on the Stabby, which is a little unfortunate, but it is in fact going to have to retreat. The Clinico causes it to heal, but this is not... I mean, it's 1300 health, so it likely, and by likely I mean it won't die. Because there's no way to actually get enough things in range due to the one move on the erratic. It can't move to the panic point. So this thing is safe for now. There was a lot of damage that went down on it, so maybe this Clinico is making me eat my words, and it's becoming more of a thorn for our blue player than I had initially thought. But since that obstacle from earlier is removed, that means Hevo now... Well, Hevo would have a line of sight anyway due to lob. It would be able to combat it. But now we're just dancing around the panic points. It's ultimately going to come down to erratic, Ginsting, and unbearable against, well, the 4 phobies that are going to be left. Now, what's going... Ooh, this is bold. Okay, they're walking away. I was about to say. They did this play earlier. But the Hevo staying there obviously would have been sealing its fate. Now, this, again, means that the panic points stay blue. And now we're looking at sub 2k health on this heart. Our blue player has an enormous amount of time to play around if they choose to. But we get a free hit from the erratic. Air quotes free. It's not really free at all because, you know, reflect. But the walk away, which means, again, we need an invade from our orange player. I'm not real clear on why they waited here. Like, are you healing? This thing is pretty low. They were probably just waiting for the erratic, or excuse me, the Clinico, so that way they could heal it and then send in the Stabby. But that gives our blue player time in order to get this unbearable into position. It gets, you know, they're already positioned with the erratic. Hypothetically, the Ginsting could have repositioned as well. It could just do it next turn. It doesn't really matter. And we obviously have to get the Hevo moved out because it is under threat from the erratic. But I'm a little surprised that well, you're positioning the Clinico in range for splash from the erratic. I get moving it up and healing it, but I sort of expected the Stabby to end up retaking the point in order to stem the bleeding. We're talking sub 1,000 health on this heart right now. This is sub 1,000 health on this heart. You have to do something, because even this means that they're going to take 600 and change. This is even cooler. So we're going to get the change over to blue as far as triple panic points, right? These are 225 damage. But leaving this sheep here, this was a good heads-up play, a great heads-up play from our blue player, because it could have easily been, oh, well, the play I had mentioned before, I'll double hit Stabby. But instead, Because the sheep was positioned there, it allowed the erratic to move up, splash some extra damage on the heart, and then reclaim the panic points, and the game just ends right now. And that goes back to something that I've repeated on many occasions for a lot of these breakdowns and in my own games. Sometimes you just have to see the way to win and go for the throat. It doesn't matter whether you eliminate phobies or punch the heart or claim all the panic points or some combination thereof. The fact of the matter is you're trying to get the win and whatever gets you there. So shout out to LilPepe for submitting this game, and we'll move on to the next. In what's becoming a regular occurrence for our game breakdowns, we're jumping into another on-to game, this time on Rent Past Due. I remember the name this time. It's not Raining Worms officially, although there are Raining Worms, as I always point out because it's super weird to me. But we're going to be jumping in. Down here in the orange trunk, spawning in the south, is our hero, Onda. And up here in the top corner is our bad guy, starting off with a fairly standard opener for this map. You, of course, see the Murder Wing claiming this point. Maps are symmetrical, so you could get a response Murder Wing down here. And the positioning from this cowbell means that it could swing south if it wanted to, or it could take this middle panic point. Now, given the way that it's set up here, I'm assuming it's going to come in here, because otherwise it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, and be just shy of taking this point. Given that it's all the way down here in the corner, I could certainly see not wanting to bother. How this usually plays out, and we'll see how the response from Onda goes, is that the responding Murder Wing will swing south and then, soften up this one key that went for this corner pocket panic point. However, the difference with this play is if you claim the middle, then you can supplement your middle phobie with the Murder Wing. But we get a response from Onda in Creep, Cowbell, and Murder Wing. I like the 6-key response on this map. Obviously, the Murder Wing can reclaim the bottom, as we discussed. The Creep can move and try and threaten the opposing Murder Wing. In this case, it's going to be slightly out of range. And we get a Cowbell just to supplement, so depending on what they do, you could retake stuff. The Gin Sting that comes in is also a fairly common response. It also allows for 6 keys to be banked, meaning that something big and nasty can come out. Now, the takedown here on the Cowbell, sure, it's fine. Now, I expect to see bees, like actual bees, come out as opposed to the regular attack from the Gin Sting, just because you get 2 targets here. You'll have plenty of time for it to regenerate. But we do have the Creep in position in order to threaten the north if need be. Now, we actually see a double attack bees and then a regular attack go down in order to kill the Cowbell. Why? Well, realistically, how are you going to kill this? It's a 1600 health, aka a level 9 Gin Sting. So you'd have to commit with all of these, and at most, you're doing 360, we'll say 900, and another 4, so like 1300. You're not killing the Gin Sting. And as the orange player, then you are overcommitted into your blue player opponent, who is following up with an erratic. This is very much just daring Onda to go after this Gin Sting. So we'll see if they take the bait. Now, what I expect to happen is that the Murder Wing will claim the south, keep the Hevo position to guard the center, and then maybe creep dance around Murder Wing, but we actually see the aggressive, or an aggressive line, not the aggressive line. Now, the erratic won't quite be in range. The Hevo will have time to retreat, but it goes in order to help soften up the Gin Sting. Makes sense. And then we get the advanced creep onto Murder Wing. I mentioned this on a bunch of recent streams, which, by the way, if you want to see some live Phobies action, head on over to RTChompGG over on Twitch. But creep has become and started to solidify itself somewhat as a Murder Wing assassin. It hunts it down and just poisons it, and look, it may take one for the team here, but that Murder Wing is going to go down to this poison, barring some really strange circumstances. Now, the Hevo is going to have to get out of dodge unless Onda elects to try and keep something, like do something wild. It does retreat. Nothing too wild. And in fact, we also get a retreat from the sheep. Now, this positioning is a little weird. We'll talk about this summon down here momentarily. But I assume the response sheep from Onda was specifically for the erratic. We just talked about this last game. I'm not a fan of sheep as an erratic answer. I'm not a fan of sheep in general. But a lot of people seem to lean into it, so at a certain point, I'm just going to have to accept it, that maybe it is a good play, and I'm just not good at it. We'll leave it at that. But the problem I have with this is that the sheep can come in, the erratic can come in, and the Gin Sting can come in. Now, that's probably not going to be enough damage. We're talking 5 here, maybe. So 11. and then another, so like 1,500. It's very unlikely that this kills the sheep. And if you can't kill the sheep, then you can't really commit on it. Now, there's an argument maybe to send in your sheep as a blue player, hit their sheep, and then just let them trade. But the follow-up Alistor has definitely complicated the matter. Alistor is very much, and I've said this before, a... you would think it would be a blight on the community. A lot of people are very upset whenever they see an Alistor alongside Grimes. And you can kind of understand why. Life Force is a very strong leech effect and requires a very particular response. It demands basically that you one-shot the Alistor. It's very difficult to actually try and chip it down because anytime it hits something, it's healing an enormous, comparatively, an enormous amount. So while we have a orange panic point advantage, the board advantage is arguably in favor of our orange player. It's still pretty even. There by no means is our blue player out of this yet. So we do see the erratic move up. It's going to be fairly aggressive about this, and I'm not sure I like this, or we'll see how it works out. But we get the Gin Sting in order to retake the point. We get the Murder Wing repositioning. We get the sheep. Hold on. This is strange. This is... So yes, your erratic can tank, but it's also going to hit the Gin Sting or your sheep. This thing is weakened enough that, well, nothing's probably going to hit it. I don't know. This feels bold. It's close enough that maybe Onda can't actually take that much down. But this feels like an easy, somewhat easy play from Onda's perspective. Now, the reason I typically don't like erratic hits, or hitting erratic with sheep, is that erratic can typically tank, and this is a level 9 erratic, so it started with 2,200 health. It's down to 1,600. Typically, you can tank the poison, but a stiff breeze after that will often spell doom for the erratic. You can't really... You have to have your opponent cooperate to a degree. Now, on certain maps, they don't really have a choice. On a smaller map, you can just get on stuff and stay on them and leech enough life that they can't get through. Or you're putting out enough damage that, yes, your erratic will die, but it doesn't... you still get your advantage out of it. Here, instead, the sheep is connecting. And when the sheep connects, it's going to end up causing an enormous problem here. Because it's blocking off what was a spider follow-up. And it's such a big map that, again, the erratic's going to take a ton of damage. There's things in position to help finish the job. And the Alistor now doesn't have an enormous set of threats here. It can kind of just slide around the periphery and poke here. This is a pretty good setup from Onda, and I can respect the sheep going in the way it is here. So we get the reclaim of the center panic point, so the panic points swing back orange again. And obviously, as mentioned, the erratic's going to leech a bunch of life off of their sheep. But right now, there's not a whole lot to actually connect with our blue player's sheep. Instead, we get the Klypto moving up, the sheep being more aggressively positioned, and their own spider follow-up. Now, the erratic, due to the poison and the leech, is now almost at 1450. We can probably pull the Klypto and get some hits on it, but I don't think... 2,100 health means that it's not likely going down. It's not likely going down, so this is probably going to necessitate a retreat from our orange player. You could yoink the sheep and probably blow it up. You would then risk... Well, you're not going to risk. You will lose your spider on the counter hit. And that might put erratic at a healthy enough life total to be concerned. So we'll have to see what Onda does here. Looks like we're going to soften up the sheep. Oh, we're extensively softening up the sheep. We're actually eliminating the sheep. It's not just softening it up, it's just exploding it. I didn't look at the health that closely, but I didn't expect this to do this. Apparently neither did our blue player. So we get this was the risk from Onda's play, that the Hevo gets pulled. So you essentially traded sheep for Hevo. Was that worth it? Probably not. This is now a fully healthy erratic. So that poison that we were talking about earlier that looked like it was going to work out, now is pointless. Like that, this accomplished nothing. And instead, we get the recap of the center. Obviously, the erratic's going to tank out the poison. The spider's still alive. Klepto's in position. I mean, the Alistor's going to heal up, but that's not the big concern here. The Woolly Bully is also, I think, questionable from Onda here. Well, we get a pull from the orange spider. I guess in order to hit this with a murder wing? Oh, okay. We get the snowball follow-up. I was going to say, like, everything's moving away. What is going to get this? But we do get the takedown on the opposing spider in order to eliminate it. That's pretty important. Although we're likely to see a counter kill on this spider as well. The erratic is clearly in range. It's splashing to a bunch of things, which is scary. We'll get a leap here, and then we get double klepto hits. So this is turning into a bloodbath on both sides. Things are going down left and right. Compared to my own gameplay, where I tend to play it very safe, this is always fun to watch, where people are just going for it. So we should have had the last... Yep, that was the last stack of poison, putting us back at almost 1450. And things are actually looking fairly dicey if I was in Onda's position. It is still an orange panic point advantage thanks to that murder fly, murder wing in the top corner, and that's now circling back. But shout out to my Suicide Squad fans. It's Starro the Conqueror. It's Rocket Man himself. This is somewhat of a game changer. So we had the Boo Fairy, which is also a very significant threat. For those unfamiliar, Boo Fairy, in this case, is a level 6. It has almost 2k health. It does almost 700 damage a hit, but it also has Stage Fright. So similar to Woolly Bully, will power stuff down, but for an enormous amount. It's almost 700 power down at 690. So you can definitely turn stuff off, much in a similar vein to Rocket Man. So we get a little more splash action going here because of the erratic. Reposition for the Boo Fairy to try and protect things. We're getting some clustering here, which could be dangerous. We'll see what our orange player chooses to freeze, the Klepto or the erratic. In this case, it looks like they may just kill the erratic. 870 health. This thing is 100% dead. It's just a matter of the way that it dies. So it's going to be probably a bop from the... From our Woolly Bully here, definitely makes sense, but the mobility afforded by Snowball allows some back caps on the panic points, which is huge. Now, in this instance, our last key goes into a muffin top. I can respect it. It's either going to cap a point or ensure something lives. I expect a takedown on probably Woolly Bully here. Yeah, it's very low. It would help if I actually clicked on these things, but it's more fun to just kind of guess at their plays. And then the advance from the Boo Fairy means that Alistor is actually just never dealing damage. Dealing literally 0 damage. But since Freeze from Rocket Man's still online... Oh wow, we get an aggressive Snowball here. This is a bold move, honestly. It's 6,100 health. You would think that pulling the Snowball back would probably be more valuable, just as supplemental damage. You know, Fireball the Boo Fairy, Fireball the Primate, whatever. We have to assume that Onda calculated this and that it was not going to be beneficial. So we actually see a little bit of a retreat, so that way we can actually protect the Phobies that are available. Now, given the spread, it's funny. Orange is taking all the blue's panic points. Well, I guess not this one. Whereas the center and the definitely blue, or should have been orange one, is blue. Can't get that out. You get the idea. They flipped their panic points. You know what I'm trying to say. So we get the march in, but because of the existing positioning, it's a challenge for blue to actually get into something that's really useful for them. I guess Snowball's just going to go ham on the heart the rest of the time. It is, I mean, panic point advantage plus how much damage does this do? 260 damage? All right, you can burn down the heart pretty quick. They do, in fact, have to both go after you and run all the way across the map. Now, what's a little surprising is we still haven't seen the freeze from Rocket Man, and in fact, it may never get a freeze. Is this going to kill it? It does, in fact, kill it. We never saw the Rocket Man freeze. But if our blue player is going to spend time chasing our orange player, They might get there. This one, it's going to be close. It's going to be close. Down to 4,300 health. If you had asked me earlier, a few turns earlier, I would have said that yes, they have to fight it out. Onda, that is, in order to close this game. But it looks like they are going to give them the runaround and slide all over the map. The Alistar movement is absolutely huge here because it allows the bypass of these obstacles, sets up a little bit of an awkward position for our blue player. Not too much because, of course, Klepto is available. But now this Alistar is in position to double hit the heart. Snowball, of course, is able to hit the heart. But the blue panic points are now the majority, which is problematic for a variety of reasons, mostly obvious. Mostly on the blue player side, but we get a collapse onto the primate here, and in conjunction with the fireball does allow for a takedown. So we may be circling back to the idea that this game has to be decided by actually fighting Phobies as opposed to fighting the heart. But the mobility here, because of the flying, is just obviously advantageous for our orange player. They have way more options of where they can go when they want to than the other player does. Now, this is a little strange. Our blue player is down to 2,700 health. Low, but not horrendous. Our Alistar is at 1,100 health. I think what probably has to happen is our blue player needs to both recap points as well as kill this Murder Wing, because you need both of these in order to kill the Alistar, and you're just not in a position to get to it. Yes, Klepto can, but Boo Fairy can only move up and power down. This Alistar is just going to run you and lead you by the nose all the way around the entire map, while this Murder Wings can come in and pummel your heart. So you need to probably retreat, recap some points, and then stabilize. But instead, we see the aggressive invade from the Klepto. It is able to hit the Alistar, and I assume we're going to see a power... Oh, I was going to say I assume we're going to see a power down, but instead, our blue player gets right on top of the Alistar, so that way it can't run quite as easily. But in this case, it doesn't matter. Because of the obstacles, because of the Abyss tiles, the Boo Fairy is never actually going to be able to really touch the Alistar unless Onda allows it. Spoiler alert, I don't think that's going to happen. Now, we do still have, believe it or not, another 12 turns of this happening. 12 turns. I think the writing is on the wall here, and we know what's going to happen. These situations can actually be super tense and super stressful if you're playing them. Obviously, depending on the board state, there's going to be an advantage one player or the other. But, oh no. Did this have to happen? Oh no. Just, you get the takedown here. I mean, the Murder Wing is not going to last. But now it's a flyer versus Boo Fairy. And in a one-on-one situation like this, it could be super scary as the orange player because, oh, well, they power down my Phobie and then I can't do anything. But given the life advantage here, we're talking 1,900 to 58. Dude, I don't see any world in which this could possibly go blue. The mistakes were made earlier in the match, and, I mean, let's face it, Alistar's pretty good. Alistar's pretty good. Was that what solely won it? Well, it could have been other things. It could have been other Phobies, I mean, that could have put the game into our orange player's favor. But at the end of the day, running around with Alistar or any other flyer like this is a valid strategy. And, like, what is our blue player supposed to do here? Was there a singular turning point for this? I'm not sure. There's plays that you could point at and go, yes, this is where things started to... They've reached the point of no return or nearing it. But I think overall it was a series of small advantages that added up and ultimately led to an Onda victory. So shout out to Onda for submitting this game. And as mentioned earlier, if you want to get your own games on stream or on YouTube for review, then hit up the Randoms Thoughts Discord. We're going to move on to the next game. Here we are for game breakdown number 3. Now, this is from someone that we haven't had too many game submissions from up to this point, and that is Darko, our hero here in the orange trunks, zoning in on Biff's room. Now, the bad guy here opening up with a cat and a Flopsy. Gotta love them jackalopes, even though they tend to eat cats, as we've seen on other breakdowns. On Biff's room is our blue player here. So, as mentioned, our bad guy is going first. This is a reasonable opener where, you typically see a cassowary or other 2-drop. You take the easy point up here. But we do see the the early beginner game special of Gravedigger. Now, why do I say that? This isn't meant to be derogatory. It's a beginner game special because on this map, I've seen a lot of beginning players that are new to Phobies, end up losing, and you tend to only lose to this once. Well, maybe not only once, but you're aware of it after that, where the Gravedigger is able to just scoot across the board and then block off this panic point and lock you out of this opening, thereby forcing you to take the scenic route around the top. We'll see if that actually materializes. But we get the Gravedigger. Honestly, you could probably have put it up one. Yes, they could have hit it twice, but you're undead. You would have collapsed with the cat. I think it's fine. It's not the end of the world. I think it would have just been more optimal to do this. This is bizarre. Okay, we've now reached the Twilight Zone. We're actually getting the seal off on Orange's own spawn with the Gravedigger and then following it up with a jar. Now, this is kind of interesting because, as mentioned before, when you're locked off like this, you lose access, but your opponent also loses access as well. I know, axiomatic. But this means that this jar can move to this advanced point over here and then cover both of these panic points with relative impunity. Now, is that going to be enough? I mean, we know the outcome to a degree, but we'll see how this goes. So we get the erratic follow-up, which is probably not what you want to see because erratic can still, of course, target the statue and splash to the jar. And in the meantime, we see all the panic points go blue. So I have to wonder if going through our orange player's head was this a mistake. But we get the reposition from the cat, claim the center panic point. It could die, but it's exceptionally unlikely. And then we get a meatball onto the cat, eliminating it, because remember, we also hit it a little bit earlier. So, obviously, pot shot from Flopsy here. We're going to get the jar follow-up. It should not take it down. Yeah, this cat's going to live, barely, but it lives. Now, the erratic has to step into range of the jar, but it's not going to be able to actually connect the jar unless our orange player allows it to happen. And I always say that a lot, but these are the sort of moves you want to look for. Set your opponent up so they have to do something because they don't have a choice or they fall behind. And then you are prepared for those scenarios. It's why going first in so many games, and maybe even arguably in Phobies, is so advantageous. You're able to dictate the flow of the game. Now, we finally see the panic points flip into our orange player's favor, but we have a follow-up bow mangle. So while the blue forces are very slow, they are fairly sturdy, they are fairly threatening, but we don't notably have any small, low-key cost Phobies in order to try and reclaim these points. And that's significant because, we'll talk about this momentarily. It's significant that there are no low Phobies because what are you going to do? Expose your erratic to their whole team? Expose bow mangles? Yeah, they'll tank it. Or they might not. Like, you have to sit there and do the math. You'd rather just be able to run in a 1-key or a 2-key, reclaim the points, and not have to worry about it most of the time. But the reason why I pause is we actually see 5 Phobies from our orange player. Given that this is a small map and it's only a 1 panic point advantage, 2-1, it means that our blue player could have hypothetically just kind of sat and banked, which we do see them banking to 6. This allows for the blue player to potentially go over the top of our orange player because they are locked into only having 5 Phobies on the boards. Remember, small map. This positioning, though, kind of leaves much to be desired. I have no idea why this jar is exposed. Like, it's gonna die trivially. You know, you hit it with this, and then, okay, you commit something to kill my Flopsy, or excuse me, kill the Mopsy, and then I just blow it up in response? This seems weird. I don't really understand this. You probably want a jar where Bow Mangles is and Bow Mangles where jar is. and then kind of go from there. That I'd feel much better about that, but we'll see how this works out. So we get the double Gin Sting hit, also a viable option. As mentioned, I probably would have gone with something a little different, but the jar is dead is the bottom line. So we get a Klepto follow-up, which is, again, cool, but a little bit of a challenge because of the fact that there are no low-key Phobies to help with the board presence. Instead, we get an enormous erratic splash onto 3 extra Phobies after hitting the Gin Sting, and then Bow Mangles to additionally soften up the Gin Sting. Now, do we have enough damage to kill this erratic? I'm going to assume yes, and not count it, because it's more fun that way. This looks like a very dead erratic. This is exactly the problem, so we're going to walk it back, just let it play in the background, but this is exactly the problem with advancing key Phobies into the teeth of your opponent's defenses, or offenses, into the teeth of their army, and having it be these high value, high cost Phobies instead of cheap ones. Imagine if this Klepto was a 5 cost and a 1 cost, and the 1 cost, okay, you take a little bit more damage, but you run it out there. You could then follow up with another 1 key in order to claim the Mopsy eventually. Ultimately, this, yes, we have a blue panic point advantage, but come on. You incinerated that erratic. There's still 9 keys available for our orange player. They're in position to just beat up all your forces all over again. We get some bees action here. We get some murder wing hits. We're going to get jar hits. It just, I don't really understand the necessity of putting that stuff out there. Now, the follow-up here is Pterodactyl plus Cassowary. The Klepto, had a brain fart for a second, couldn't think of the name of the Phobie. The Klepto did not actually go down, but realistically, this thing is, it's at 11 health. Like, come on. This thing is dead. So it gets in one last hit before it walks away. The Bow Mangles is going to finish its dirty work, eliminate the Murder Wing. But there aren't enough bodies here to threaten this Pterodactyl. Let's assume for a moment that, you know, well, we don't have to assume. Like, you can't really kill these things. But you don't have to. You can reclaim this point, and you don't have enough forces as the blue player to actually deal with the Pterodactyl. Now, we are seeing some things happen and things that go down that could possibly lead to a loss for our orange player, but everything's still sitting in range here. You still have the Bow Mangles in range of the jar, so the Cassowary trade was fine, and I'm sure that was calculated. It looked dicey momentarily, because, again, we're seeing this bloodbath of Phobies, but something that's now becoming a recurring theme is, with the way some of these plays work out, yes, the games will look close, but aren't actually close, where it would have always played out this way. Always, air quotes. Obviously, somebody can make an egregious mistake, something else could go wrong, but given the constraints of what was happening, you need somebody to intervene in a very strange way in order to change the outcome. Now here we're seeing the final dance as we close in on the end of this particular game, but this was a pretty cool play, getting that jar locked off. I honestly have not seen that done. As I started out with when I was explaining the Gravedigger play, it's always been lock off your opponent, which is clearly more challenging. But here, it seemed to have worked out pretty well, despite having the erratic follow-up, despite having Klepto. There were a number of dangerous Phobies that were showing up on blue's side, but orange was able to take it down. So, shout out to Darko. Appreciate you submitting the game. But we'll jump into the next one right after this. Here we are, zoning into the Floor's Lava, the map that seems to be the one that everybody loves to hate, but our hero here in the blue trunks is hollw. I'm going to say hollw rather than hollw. The reason I say that is because I incorrectly, when reviewing this person's game previously, was referring to them as hollw, who's another member of the Random Slots Discord, which, by the way, if you want to get your own games on stream here or on YouTube, then you want to hit up the Random Slots Discord in the YouTube description. Likes and subscribes help. But I want to make sure that I call out everybody's name appropriately, so we're going to say hollw, and if I'm still screwing it up, feel free to correct me. Not just this person, but everybody. If I screw up your name, I want to get it right. Whereas the bad guy zoning in, going second on Floor's Lava, a very much unenviable position. Can't talk. Been doing a few of these in a row. Throat's getting dry. Yeah. Gotta get the mouth working. And we see not a standard opener, but a pretty solid aggressive opener. We get a 2 and a 1 as opposed to 1, 1, 1. Or just 1, 1 and bank to 4. This allows a 2 panic point capture early on. Fairly obvious, and definitely I think anybody who's played this map has recognized that particular opener. So, what's the answer from our orange player? We get a cowbell, and we get a murder wing. Now, the murder wing is going to do what I used to do when this map was in rotation last, which was a while ago, is to claim these pocket points, and it actually equalizes it here. Now, given the canine and the cat, that means that there isn't going to be there could be pressure. So there was an option for our blue player to eliminate this cowbell, possibly. 336, 471. They probably could have gotten this. I'm not going to bother counting because it's not that important. A, since they didn't do it, and B, because if this canine stood on the lava, clearly softens it up, and it's dangerously close to the opponent's vault. Instead, we get the cat repositioning, and the canine. So this is something I want to call out. The canine, given how tanky it is, has the option, if I can click on it to show how tanky it is, there we go. Originally starts with almost 1300 health. This is important because there's basically nothing that's going to kill it, right? Like, you pop something out, it would have only been 3 keys. The cowbell could move up, so okay, at most you do 700, and this is sitting on lava. That means that it allows for an aggressive panic point capture up here in the north, and the cat pulling back here means it's 4-2, which it's 6 total panic points. Kind of an abnormality for a lot of Phobies maps, where typically it's an odd number. Here it's even, so that single panic point change is actually a 2 panic point swing here, compared to if it was just 3-2 on I guess any recapture would be a 2 panic point swing, but I hope you get where I'm going with it. Instead of being a 3-2 panic point situation, we're talking 4-2, so we're pushing additional damage. This map is very aggressive. So the stabby down here starts to get into position. We see stabby very commonly show up on this map, as well as many others, but this stabby actually made the journey all the way up to the north here, and we get a supplemental unicorn. Given how they're positioned, it's going to be difficult to invade. Plus, you can just pop out a 1 key or run this cat back to reclaim these points. But the cowbell goes up north. It's going to be sacrificed. We know what's happening. Now, we get a follow-up Clinico. This is a strange Clinico. I get it. Clinico's protecting Stabby. Stabby's going to try and control the point. But the issue here is that I don't know that it's just 3 keys that you could be putting to better use, more aggressive use. You're on the back foot from a panic point perspective. You weren't at the time because you had the cowbell, but you have to assume that that's going to go down quickly. This is also kind of bold. Like, what is this Stabby doing? So Stabby attacks once. We get the finish from the Clinico, but the Clinico now is standing on the lava. The cat's just going to make its trip over to the panic point. Why did this Clinico have to stand on the lava? Why not just hit it twice with Stabby? The Stabby did not reposition, so it had another action. That's a little confusing. In the meantime, while I'm trying to ponder that, we still have an even panic point situation, which has allowed our blue player to advance a primate and reposition the canine in order to try and reclaim that top panic point. Dislodging this Stabby is going to be very challenging. You have a bunch of one-move phobies. A bunch of things are going to end up on the lava. Now, here's the unfortunate part. Maybe not unfortunate for our orange players, or from our orange players' perspective, but we see a Venus. It clearly was going to drop out a trap here, and in fact, it did, which means that this canine is now down to a mere 247 health out of its original 1264, so it's not long for the world. And that allows the Venus to advance, even out the panic points again. Now this is, I don't, Why did this Stabby invade? I understand wanting to be aggressive and wanting to take points. I have no idea why this stabby ended up here, because even assuming there wasn't a trap here, which, by the way, there was always going to be a trap here. This unicorn's been out there way too long for there not to be a trap on the space that it's been sitting next to, right? So this is 4. This is, we'll round it up to 1,000 here, so say 1,400, because it will leap and then attack. This is 1,800. This stabby is 100% dead, and they reclaim the point without losing anything. Now, possibly, given this noxious, aggressive, noxious follow-up, if they do this, Clinico's dead before... So, like, this Clinico's going to die. Well, they can move the Clinico still, so we'll assume the Clinico gets out of there. So, if the assumption here is that all 3 of these need to attack stabby, that leaves noxious alive, and you have to get rid of stabby before you can get to noxious, so therefore noxious is fairly safe. And then you spit and run away, I guess? I mean, you could follow up with a meatball. I don't know, this feels overly aggressive. We knew, observing the game, that there was a trap here, but as mentioned, our orange player has to suspect a trap. There's just no way there's not a trap, right? So we do get the aggressive meatball play, reclaim this point, trap goes down, and now all of a sudden it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 orange panic points to 1. They're trying to close this life gap very quickly. Now, because of the trap hit, it affords a little bit of flexibility to our blue player in figuring out how they want to answer this stuff. We actually see the leap and unicorn hits go down in order to eliminate this murder wing down here. We get the pull. Shout out to all of those challenges. We always bring it up. The dimensionals go down. Pulls the stabby. Now, this Clinico, I guess, did have to die. I guess it absolutely had to die. Why did it have to die? What did they do here? So they hit this. It did have to die in order to make this play happen. But did this play have to happen? I don't know. Well, we'll look at the follow-up turn. Skip ahead. So we get the spit, presumably a retreat. Yep. So now Stabby and Unicorn, one of them is going to die. Because you can't save both with a Clinico unless you have, like, Clinico Muffin. Which feels, again, like an enormous key investment. So instead, we see the Clinico come out after a trap goes down and keep Stabby alive. Makes sense. Get the reposition from Stabby in order to get a softening hit onto Venus, as well as our Hevo follow-up, which, by the way, is a strong follow-up because of the poison, so that you didn't risk, like, an extra splash. We do get a trap hit from our Venus player going down onto Stabby. Also makes sense. But now we're back to the aggressive invades. Panic point advantage is blue. And we get an erratic follow-up, chewing through the remaining keys of our orange player. Now, at this stage, our blue player is not in a spectacular position. They could try and burn down the heart. It is possible to walk Primate and just punch it. Are they going to go there? I expect a takedown on Venus here. If that's the case, that means that the Noxious comes back as well as the Erratic to combat this, and you're in a kind of a weird spot. Plus, it would also pin the Hevo for Erratic hits, at least for a turn. But we have 4 keys remaining, so there are a few different options that could come out. We get the Sheep. Feels like it's the day of the Sheep. We're seeing a ton of Sheep to answer these Erratics. Now here, given the low quantity of blue Phobies in general, maybe it makes sense because then the Erratic can't leech as much. But there is a mechanical Phobie, which means it is going to be doing a ton of damage. So thanks to the Noxious, we're now evening the panic points as 3-3. Well, we're seeing some aggressive plays onto this Erratic, and it's probably dead. I have to imagine that this is a dead Erratic. Not like this. You know, I keep saying that I don't like Sheep as an answer to Erratic, and here, it kind of supports my argument, because realistically, anything that could have done this amount of damage would have been fine. I don't know why our orange player elected to expose the Erratic there, but they've also made some other plays where they were seemingly a little over-aggressive from these. A little over-aggressive. Instead, we see the big Sheep Gas go down onto Noxious. A little irony there. Poison going down onto the Poison Phobie. And just like that, our blue player is in complete control. Majority panic points, way more Phobies. Oh, and by the by, Poison takes him down. So GG. Shout out to hollw. Thank you for submitting this game. My bad on screwing up the name before. We'll jump into one more game. One more Biff's Room game for you, everybody. We're zoning in, and we have our hero up here in the orange trunks. It is Vazy. The bad guy here in the blue trunks, opening up Canine, and Cat is our blue player. The bad guy, if you will. So, we saw a variety of different things take this 2-slot place over time, and ooh, we got an interesting opener from our orange player. Enough about the common one. Let's talk about the uncommon opener. We got a Gesundheit off the bat, moving to the northmost position here. I imagine it's going to claim this spot. We've talked a lot about the Stabby opener. You'll understand why I'm bringing up Stabby momentarily. But, talked a lot about the Stabby opener. And the reason that it matters here is that Stabby doesn't really cover this map very well as compared to a lot of other maps where you can turret between 2 points and then lock down, say, the neutral. So you gain control of it and then hold it. And then one of the other points to make your opponent think about it or protect it in some way. Here, it's very difficult. You'd have to have Stabby super advanced, like to the northwest of this Canine or down here or something like that. And it's just an awkward position unless you break something with a Gravedigger or Mount Crushmore. Instead, we see a Gesundheit, which can serve much of the same purpose, but it can sit on top of these obstacles. We'll have to see if that's how it works out. It's going to take a little bit of doing in order to get it to position and not just have things collapse on it and die. Of course, it only has 708 health, so we'll see how it works out. We also get a Answer Canine to take the obvious one down to the bottom. And then our blue player supplements their army with Bow Mangles. We're speaking about Stabby, but we see a different turret character show up. Bow Mangles is kind of the answer when people say, I don't have a Stabby, or what do I have that I could use instead of Stabby? Often the answer is Bow Mangles because it serves much the same purpose. Now, the difference here is that you have answers more readily available to Bow Mangles early on, one of which is this Thunder Rocks here. There's now 3 mechanicals with the supplemented jar, although if Thunder Rocks were to connect with it, just about anything is killing a jar pretty quickly. But it allows, the threat of Thunder Rocks is now increased because of the multiple mechanical phobies. And we're just seeing the great dance from our blue player as they bank keys as well as our orange player banking to try and get big stuff going down. So, wow, both of them banked to 9, being very willing to just stay here. And we see, all right, we have the siege engine here. We have the siege engine here, folks. It is Mildred. Kitty littering. This is going to cause some problems. This is a difficult map not to cluster on, just because of the way it's laid out. So we're going to have some very interesting... Ooh, we get a smiley as the answer. So our blue player is now locked into 5 phobies. Our orange player still has the option to do something. Now, they elected to claim the middle and not move up the Mildred to this other point. And this other point, I mean one more space. I'm not sure why. The Smiley would not be able to run it down, but it would be in position to dive and hit stuff if it wanted to, the Mildred that is. But instead, it's playing it a little more defensively. Now, Mildred is a lob, but our blue player is going to have to commit in and allow that Mildred to go off. Here we just see the softening up of the Canine, which had reclaimed this point. But we do get the advance... Ooh, okay. This is a very interesting game. We get a much different variety of phobies than we typically see. So the push here by the Thunder Rocks is going to threaten this Bow Mangle. By the way, it's also a level 9 Bow Mangle, so it has almost 2k health. So we'll get the hit here. We're going to get the follow-up from the Gesundheit. So a bunch of damage goes down on it, but it's still not enough to kill it. However, we do get a body block as well as damage onto the Smiley from the canine. Pulling back the canine probably wouldn't accomplish much. It's going to die. This does allow the Smiley to get in, reclaim a point, as well as drop disease onto these two if our blue player wants to do that. Instead, they're choosing to play very defensively with this. This is strange. So just to talk about it for a second, we do have a fish tank follow-up. It's a pretty big fish tank too. It's a level 9 fish tank. 3k health, almost 900 damage per punch. That's some heavy punching. Now, the Mildred here, and this could be why the Smiley went here, is as a deterrent. So if the Mildred hits this canine, which is in range, it will then hit these two, and that will cause the Mildred to get diseased. Is that, like, I don't know. Maybe it would have been better to just get these. They wouldn't have died. And instead, we see, like, they would have been diseased, but they wouldn't have died, so these 2 kills would have happened anyway. It just feels a little weird to not take the disease when you can, but then again, maybe the Smiley would have gone down. I didn't bother counting it up. Yeah, the Smiley probably would have gone down, so I kind of get that. Instead, we have the fish tank advance as well, and then a couple kills happening. Ooh, Sparky. I mentioned before, I'm not a huge fan of Sparky. This is a level 10 Sparky, though. It's a pretty solid Sparky, so it's putting a hurt on this fish tank, but even after that solid hit of almost 1,000, look at this, it's still above 2,100 health. That's more health than a lot of Phobies start with. So, the Smiley has to retreat, which presumably was brought out originally just to have as a Mildred answer, and here, this is... That's a very funny Mildred attack. Not just the animation, but that it was done strictly to eliminate that snowball. Strictly to eliminate that snowball. But we have a panic point advantage going to orange. And as a result, we have kind of a strange standoff here. Not really a standoff. That's not the right way to put it. But a strange situation that has developed where we have a clinical follow-up, which was the remainder of the keys from our orange player, in order to try and help out this fish tank, which is now down to 1,600 health. But it's basically Sparky against these 3. Because the Smiley literally can't interact with 2 of the 3 Phobies. And Sparky, as mentioned, I don't really like it. Sparky's not going to be putting out a lot of damage onto this Mildred. So eventually this Mildred is going to, it looks like it's going to be able to attack again. So this... I don't think it's a dead Sparky, but we finally get the Smiley connection. We get the Smiley connection. With 1,200 damage going down on the Sparky. So it's not quite dead, which is why we see the retreat here. But the Mildred has enough health, despite the disease. You know, it's going to take some damage here. But it still has 2,100 health. I almost would have rather seen the blue player, instead of getting this hit on Mildred, try and recap this point. Because they likely are not going to kill the Mildred. But they can, of course, recap points with Smiley as they reposition. The Mildred, while active now, is not going to necessarily be able to get anything. Certainly not for a couple turns, as it has to reposition. But you could trap the blue player Sparky, and then as long as you have 2 Phobies, you can run around the map and the Smiley can't get the job done. So we get a reposition from Fish Tank. We're actually going to get a takedown on Smiley, or I assume this is a takedown. Yep. The cats do it. That means that panic points go orange again, and at this stage, it's all over but the crying. I don't see how blue player gets out of this. This was a pretty cool back and forth. I don't... this felt like Phobie choice. I don't know what our blue player's collection looks like, obviously, but I'm just not a fan of Stabby, and I think the Smiley positioning would have been better. I get trying to get it to land on Mildred. Maybe the smiley was never a good choice to begin with. I don't think that's necessarily the case, but once you've committed to that smiley, maybe just guaranteeing that these two things go down, maybe positioning slightly differently the turn before that, you know, playing a little more defensively to preserve more of your board. But we actually see the Mildred finish to punch the heart or clobber the heart, pummel the heart, bury the heart in cats. Creepy, but funny. So shout out to Vazy. Thank you for the game submission. But that's going to do it for this time. So if you're interested in getting your own game reviewed, as mentioned before, hit up the Random Slots Discord. It'll be in the description of this video. If you've enjoyed this game breakdown or you're interested in more Phobies content, a like and a subscribe definitely help out. As to comments, as always, I try to make every effort to answer all the comments. But that'll do it for this time. So as always, everybody, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And Black Lives Matter.